Mission Impossible Final Reckoning keeps the best parts of its franchise while ramping up the bad parts to 11. The over-the-top scenarios, stunt work, suspense, and intensity is all here in droves, but what's also here is the nonsense inciting conflicts and convoluted contrivances that pop up constantly, making new challenges for the characters to overcome, which they do through astronomical luck and contrivances just as convoluted as the challenges themselves, and for me, it was too much. I found I have to try and turn my brain off to enjoy most Mission Impossible films, and that isn't a compliment, but the action, suspense, and impressive stunts can still make an enjoyable viewing experience, especially when there's an engaging enough villain for them to defeat. But for Final Reckoning, just like in Part 1, the stupidity throughout the plot and nonsense constantly playing out on screen was not only beyond my ability to ignore, this film is arguably the most retarded Mission Impossible film ever made. And yes, that's fighting Mission Impossible 2 for that title, but I don't hate myself enough to rewatch it, so I can decide for myself. It's a pity because you can see so much effort put into this film, especially the large action moments. The final fight scene in the plane is very impressive. But the villain ends up killing himself in a very anticlimactic way, and I wish they put in as much effort into the plot of this film as they do to the stunts. It's like the plot, the very thing that's driving every action and choice in the film is merely there as an annoying distraction, an excuse to put the characters in those intense action scenes, and any excuse, no matter how stupid, will do. One of my pet peeves of the Mission Impossible film franchise, which is present in this film to the most egregious level, is the dumb luck that so many of the characters rely on to succeed. And honestly, calling it dumb luck doesn't go far enough. We're at a point where the only possible explanation for Ethan Hunt's lucky victories is divine providence, and I would honestly find it more believable if an angel appeared before Ethan, letting him know it was literally the hand of God that warped reality, so these retarded moments of arbitrary random chance always turns out in his favor, than to try and wave it all away as just being lucky circumstances. For instance, in this film, Ethan jumps into the middle of an ice-cold ocean to try and get aboard a submarine with a window of about a minute for the sub to find him, not knowing that the sub even got the message that is coming, without knowing where specifically the sub is in that area. But not only is he astronomically lucky that the sub did get the message and he lands in the exact position where the sub is, even though they were flying blind to its location, he lands in the exact position where divers are waiting for him to rescue him and take him back to that sub. Please, think about this for a moment. It's just one example in a film literally full of arbitrary crap like this, where Ethan doesn't do anything smart or skillful, he's effectively committing suicide with the most slim of astronomical chances that it could work out. And the chances of it working out is not based on anything that he can do apart from literally being saved by the hand of God, which is basically what happens. At this point, the Mission Impossible franchise should just be called the Deus Ex Machina franchise. This film, like many in the series, is full of this crap. But one of the other constant traits of this franchise is also the regular, constantly bad luck that always befalls the characters in specifically the most desperate moments, which of course draws out the action scenes and suspense, so it always, and I mean always, comes down to the very limit of failure. We're meaning like under a second from death or world-ending disaster, which is exactly what this film does. They have literally the moment of the blinking of an eye to save the world. I know that they do this to try and ramp up the tension, but it's a stale formula that has grown very predictable by this point. You know that whatever plan they try, several things are going to go wrong along the way, sometimes devastatingly so that the only way out is through that Deus Ex Machina again, and the reasons for so many things going wrong are often just random happenstance. Instead of trying to make things feel more believable and therefore immersive and desperate, the film ramps up all the worst practices in its franchise in the hopes that it will increase the wow factor, but by this point, it only manages to make things feel stupid beyond reason. The arbitrary nonsense spattered all throughout this film could be pointed out bit by bit, but that would just take way too long. So I'm going to focus in on a very big and important scene in the film which demonstrates what I'm saying perfectly, and it's when Ethan has to go deep diving to get the entity's source code in the sunken submarine. And in case you didn't see part 1, they're trying to stop an evil artificial intelligence from overtaking the world's nuclear arsenal and setting them all off, literally destroying the entire world. Now, the film says that they need the source code to be able to take out this artificial intelligence without it actually explaining why. Why can't they get some of the source code from the people that made it? Why is it particularly vulnerable to access to its source code when it's clearly copied itself onto hundreds of different servers all throughout the world? Don't know, but supposedly the only copy of it is in this submarine at the bottom of the ocean. And for Ethan to dive that deep, he is given a special suit that will lessen the severity of the harmful pressure and also the decompression in recovery. When he gets to the sub, he inadvertently destabilizes it, causing it to roll. Bad luck there, Ethan. But guess what? The sub happens to have sunken onto a slope which leads to an underwater cliff. Well, bad luck again there, Ethan. The sub begins to roll down the slope, which causes things to constantly get in his way, like a torpedo falling onto a door hatch blocking his way at the very moment he was about to go through it. More bad luck there, Ethan, even though it would have rolled out of the way as the sub continued to rotate. But Ethan actually forgets about that and thinks the only way out of the sub now is through the torpedo tubes, because that's what the film wants you to think. That this is the only way out, but Ethan can't fit into the torpedo tube because his special suit is too bulky, specifically the backpack that has the air canisters. Just bad luck there again. Now, for some reason, he just can't take off the backpack and he has to cut open the insulating wetsuit he's wearing to get it off, to the point where he's literally only in his underwear in freezing water. Just bad luck again. He pushes the air pack into the tube first, and him following, as the sub begins to fall off the cliff. More bad luck. But he manages to get out of the tube as the sub is now sinking further below. Yet the pack gets caught on a bit of jagged metal connected to the sub, which pulls him down with it. Really bad luck there, Ethan. Ethan has no other choice but to cut himself free, now losing his breathing masks thousands of feet underwater in ice-cold freezing water. Like, holy crap, the guy can't catch a break. I mean, I can accept a few things getting in your way, but one mission-breaking disaster after another just becomes artificial and forced by this point. And now we are expected to believe he could get out of this situation by just swimming to the surface, literally thousands of feet, where the film already established he needed a special suit to not die from the decompression, or at the very least, not take days to recover from it. No human could ever logically survive anything even close to this, but Ethan does because Deus Ex Machina, the hand of God, comes in and grants him superpowers. With nothing to guide him, he hits the underside of the ice on the surface at the exact position where his girlfriend is waiting to save him. How did she know he would surface in that exact spot? How did he know to guide himself to that? But actually, he was unconscious by that point, so he wasn't guiding himself at all. No idea. It's just plain dumb luck. And if it literally took like 1 second more for him to be rescued, he would have died and the world would be destroyed. Do you see what I mean about the constant contrived bad luck that befalls the characters in their most crucial missions as a way to artificially try to create more suspense, which often puts them into situations where they can only be saved by literal blind dumb luck? It's like all the bullcrap good luck is there to balance out all the bullcrap bad luck, but these don't actually cancel each other out. They compound the problem. And the arbitrary nonsense and fake artificial feeling in everything that's happening on screen just feels worse. And all of these issues are built on the back of one of the dumbest plots I have ever tried to wrap my head around. So brace yourself, because we're about to be hit with another torrent of nonsense. But before I hit you with that, let me tell you about this video's sponsor. So here's the thing. Your information is actually very valuable. So valuable, in fact, that there are many organizations out in the world that want to get it. And they should not have access to it without your consent, especially if they want to use that information for certain ends or distribute it. This is where Incogni comes in. It is a service that works for you to remove your personal information from many online data centers. In the US, there are even sites called people search sites that have many people's information. Well, through Incogni, you can get your information removed from those sites and many other places where your information could be exploited for nefarious means. This can really help you out against identity theft, scams, harassment, and stalking. It's genuinely a really valuable service. I've literally had people try and impersonate me online. There are real-world examples of massive loans being taken out in other people's names without their knowledge. Your information gets sold to large data brokers as well as your movements online, things you might be interested in, what you're purchasing. That's all valuable information that you should have control over. But Incogni can put an end to so many problems, and you can do it in 3 really simple steps. All you need to do is make an account, give them the ability to take your personal information off these places, and just kick back and let them work for you. It's an ongoing service where they repeatedly make data removal requests while you are signed up for them. They just don't do it once, continually protecting your privacy. It's a genuinely valuable service, especially if you value your privacy. So if you use code KNIGHTS, all in capitals, KNIGHTS, and use the link below, you can get a full 60% off an annual Incogni plan. It's a massive discount, promo code KNIGHTS, all in capitals, KNIGHTS with a K, and protect your personal information online. So thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. You see, this film is a part 2, and the stupidity of part 1 is still here. The all-powerful truth-eating artificial intelligence is still running rampant, but this time it is brute-forcing itself to take control over each country's nuclear arsenal. The thing is, preventing something from hacking into a nuclear weapon is actually easy. Just disconnect the control system from the internet or any external accessible network. You know, like most nuclear systems are. Many nuclear systems literally function on this basis, like nuclear attack submarines. And what's worse, they even acknowledge that they can simply cut power to their nuclear arsenal to prevent this, but they say that that would be a terrible idea because that would leave them vulnerable to attacks from other countries, but leaving the nukes connected to the internet so the entity can take over every country's nuclear weapons does not leave them vulnerable? Please make it make sense! Every country decides to be just as retarded as the other and lets the entity take over their nukes, but the US is last because their digital defense is just stronger because, reasons. And then the US government thinks that they should nuke the world as a last measure before the entity takes over the other nukes. So I have to admit, my brain was hurting through a lot of this film, and I'm doing my very best to remember this convoluted bullcrap from a single viewing, so I apologize if I get some of the finer details wrong. But to the best of my understanding and recollection, the film presents the US government that they think that they should nuke the world, the other countries, as a last measure before the entity takes over the other countries' nukes, thinking that nuking the other countries will stop the entity from using the other countries' nukes on them. And if that is the case, that ignores the reality that most countries don't actually know where each other's nukes are hidden or where they would be launched from, because many countries' nukes are actually on constantly moving launch platforms called nuclear submarines. And then the president even plans to nuke one of the US's own countries for some reasons that I actually can't even remember the reason why. And I can't even think of a reason to try and justify this, that they would nuke one of their own cities. Like, my goodness. This plan that the president comes depressingly close to carrying out is just retarded beyond comprehension, and the tension built up in regards to it comes off as comically stupid as a result. And in regards to all this, the standing threat of the entity, separate to it just taking over everyone's nukes, no one thinks to just shut down every server connected to the internet, and I think the film wants us to believe that that would be too devastating to carry out. Like more devastating than the alternative, which is literal nuclear global devastation. And honestly, shutting down every server on the internet wouldn't actually be as devastating as perhaps the film is trying to get us to think. I mean, we were perfectly capable of running the world off of analog technology before, and I get that certain parts of infrastructure wouldn't work without the internet currently, but still, I'd say that's an easy trade compared to the alternative here. The literal global devastation that is looming over the world has a very simple solution. And this stupidity is what is driving the whole story forward, and it just gets worse from there. This is a problem when writers try and work with plot elements that they don't understand. A lot of previous Mission Impossible plots were based off of much simpler dangers. Bad guy wants to steal a nuke or a virus or something bad and use it in bad ways, which also seemed to be much harder to pull off in the past. In this film, the bad guy is pulling out spare nukes from his ass with no explanation at all, which really undermines, the entire plot of Mission Impossible Fallout. The writing here does not understand science fiction, AI, global nuclear defense systems, the internet, or even computers on basic levels. I don't consider myself an expert on any of those, but I certainly understand these things enough to see the unbelievable stupidity of how these things are implemented in the story of this film. A film that really relies on their audience turning off every brain cell they have to enjoy this thing, which is an insult to intelligence. Now, it would take far too long to try and explain all the issues of this film, but I will mention some of the bigger ones that stood out to me. Take this one, for instance. Luther got some of the entity's code in part 1 and is able to engineer a poison pill that will kill the entity if combined with some of its source code, because that's definitely how source code works, and no one thinks to actually find any source code from the people who made this thing in the first place. No, the only copy of the source code is on the destroyed Russian sub, now sunk at the bottom of the ocean. And Luther makes no copy of the poison pill that he is able to backwards engineer, even though they showed in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation making copies of crucial data like this is standard practice.
Please tell me you made a copy of that disk.
Of course I made a copy.
And that, of course, is a really big problem when that poison pill is stolen by the bad guy of this film, Gabriel. But Luther isn't done. He also just so happened to invented a 5D optical data drive storage device that can hold some unthinkable amounts of data in a cave on his own. That is literally a world-changing technology on the same level as quantum computing, a technology that thousands of people have put millions of hours into figuring out, but at this point remains unsolved. But Luther pulls it out of his ass because a retarded plot device is needed in the film. They also needed the location of the sunken sub, and luckily, the guy at the sensor station has literally memorized the one random underwater seismic event that they needed. Not all the other ones that the sensors would have detected over, literally like 15 to 20 years, just the specific one that they need, and luckily he has destroyed all other records of that data so the Russians can't get it. Complete, arbitrary, random bullcrap. And if he didn't just do that off of a whim that Ethan's team manages to find out he has and get from him, the world would be destroyed. The characters and heroes of this film succeed in so many instances just due to dumb luck that it really undermines any achievement that they might actually achieve based on their own effort and talent and skill. Now, I've already talked about Ethan jumping into the middle of the ocean to get aboard the sub, and also diving for the sunken submarine, which is all just so stupid. But after that, when he is recovered, which he recovers in only a couple of hours, mind you, not days, as the film establishes that you would need to if you go through decompression without the special suit. The special suit that he cut off of himself, but it is just a superhuman or something. But now that they are together, they spin some of the most convoluted nonsense I've ever heard to establish what they need to do to destroy the entity and stop the bad guy, Gabriel. And wow, I thought the convoluted nonsense that they had to do to disarm the nukes in Mission Impossible Fallout was bad, but this takes the cake. At least in Fallout, the nuclear weapons were designed to not be able to be disarmed with all these redundancies, which is kind of the setup as to why they had to go through so many random, weird, like processes to disarm those nuclear weapons. That's not the case with this. It's a combination of multiple random factors that weren't put together to be so difficult. It is all forced just to make the final mission as difficult as possible, because they can only use the poison pill with the entity's source code to destroy it after it downloads itself into some doomsday computer bunker in South Africa. But they can only use the poison pill and source code outside the bunker, and so they plan to give the source code to the bad guy because none of them can do it themselves for some reason. But once the source code and poison pill are put together, they only have a second, literally, a second, to cut a wire and download the entity into the 5D optical drive that Luther previously pulled out of his ass at the beginning of the film. Their reasoning to try and justify this makes utterly no sense at all. A crazy set of tasks that one might think is impossible. Indeed, an impossible mission, if you will. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a team that's trained and built to, achieve and pull off what seems to be impossible, and when that team achieves it through their own skill and planning, it comes off very satisfying and is enjoyable to watch. But instead, in this film, everything goes awry almost instantly, and the characters are just forced to kind of flounder about like balls in a ping pong machine, trying to pull together some random set of arbitrary tasks that need to be achieved that is not justified in any sense of feasible logic to stop this artificial intelligence. And of course, they do pull it off, only thanks to the most astronomically lucky nonsense in the world. It undermines the tension and truly crazy stunts that we see at the climax of the film. And the villain, Gabriel, who was now built up over 2 films having murdered 2 of Ethan's friends, accidentally kills himself in the end in one of the most goofy and dumb ways I've ever seen. Literally, he tells Ethan there's only 1 parachute, even though Ethan finds a second parachute a bit later, so I guess he forgot about that, and believes he's leaving Ethan to his death by pulling his parachute while still technically on the plane. The parachute, once open, then pulls the bad guy into the rudder where he breaks his head on the rudder and dies. That's it. He kills himself by trying to escape, and Ethan doesn't actually kill him. Yes, he kind of causes him to do it, but it's nowhere near the emotional payoff that we want from the guy that wants to bring justice to the murder of his 2 friends. And then the day is saved, literally down to the millisecond fraction opening. But because all these tasks that they needed to pull off are founded on stupid nonsense, there is no satisfying payoff here at all. And all in all, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning is a very disappointing and stupid film which lets down some truly amazing stunts and the hard work put into it. But hey, if you can turn your brain off enough, there just could be something here you might enjoy. And as always, stay on watch.